welcome to the Economic Bulletin, where we deliver comprehensive coverage and expert insights into key updates on the pivotal economic trends and financial shifts influencing the economic scene. Now we start off with Iran. The U.S. State Department has announced that the United States and G7 will impose sanctions against Iran. It stated that Washington is in talks with Israel regarding the nature of its response to Iran, stressing that Tehran's escalation is unprecedented. Earlier on Wednesday, U.S. President Joe Biden stated that he is against the Israeli attacks on Iran's nuclear sites, confirming that Washington will impose sanctions on Iran.
This morning, in advance of the president's call with the G7 leaders, the secretary convened a call of the foreign ministers from France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. On that call, he discussed with them working together to coordinate a response to Iran's attack on Israel. Further discussed how to coordinate diplomatic efforts moving forward to ensure stability in the Middle East. The secretary then joined the president's call with the G7. I'm sure you saw the readout that the White House issued a short time ago, where they made clear that the G7 condemns Iran's attack on Israel and is working together on a response, including new sanctions.
As tensions with Israel escalate, Iran faces increased pressure on its financial stability. What are Iran's economic challenges?
The Iranian economy, even before the recent escalation of tensions with Israel, has been grappling with significant challenges, including high inflation, unemployment, and a depreciating currency. The situation has been compounded by ongoing U.S. sanctions, which has severely limited Iran's ability to engage in international financial transactions and directly impacted the currency, the rial, which reached 580,000 rials per US dollar on the black market. Inflation in Iran stood at 41.5% in 2023 and is projected to ease slightly to 37.5% in 2024, down from a high of 46% in 2022. Unemployment remains persistently high, hovering around 8.5% for 2024. According to the IMF, the economy, which grew by 4.7% in both 2021 and 2023, is expected to slow to 3.3% in 2024. Despite having the world's second largest natural gas reserves and fourth largest oil reserves, Iran faces volatility due to sanctions. However, it managed to maintain oil exports primarily to China. In early 2024, oil exports reached 1.56 million barrels per day, the highest level in 6 years. While oil revenues provide some economic buffer, prolonged conflict would further strain Iran's finances. Military expenses could force the government to cut subsidies and other essential expenditures, deepening public dissatisfaction and potentially leading to social unrest.
Joining us today to discuss the recent escalations and the impact of it on the Iranian economy is Dr. Ali Khurshid, a professor of international economics. Welcome, sir, and thank you for joining us on the Economic Bulletin.
Thank you very much. Hello.
So firstly, how will the US and G7 sanctions impact Iran's economy, particularly in sectors already strained by existing sanctions, such as the oil exports and financial transactions?
Well, the sanctions, as you may know, and that your reporter was mentioning a few minutes ago, the sanction is not something new. It has been going on for the last few years. They haven't worked at all because Iran found a way of selling the oil in the black market through another agents, and the agents sell the oil to somewhere else. And they load the oil in tankers in Iran, and they unload it in the middle of the sea to another tanker to go somewhere else, and nobody knows where it goes. So the sanctions is a good idea if it works, but now we can see that Iran managed to find ways of avoiding the sanction and ways of working alongside the world economy without having the sanction affecting them. That's not only to say that no sanctions. Until the whole world stand together to get that sanctions working, I can see myself that is the sanctions is not doing what it should do 100%, maybe doing a very small percentage. But, generally speaking, if you have a mouse trapped in a room without food or drink, he will find a way of getting out. And that's exactly what Iran has done.
So your belief, sir, is that basically Iran will be able to dodge the effects of these sanctions. But do you think that there would be panic buying of gasoline and the suspension of commercial flights in Iran, for instance, or Iranian airspace in general? Will this also have some sort of effect on the economy? Obviously, if the escalations increase in Iran and there is targeting of Iranian lands, and it affects flights, do you think this may affect the Iranian economy in general and the average Iranian citizen?
Well, it affects not just Iran, it affects all, a lot of other countries. For instance, if one want to buy oil from Iran and had to buy it from a third party, so obviously the price will be different than buying directly from the source. And obviously all the other countries who rely on oil, whether it comes from Iran or come from somewhere else, had to pay a premium price for getting that oil. So the world economy will be affected, not just Iran by the sanctions. The most of the other countries who buy this oil will be affected, particularly the third world countries, the poorer countries, who just about scraping their barrel to buy the oil, and then they find that the oil prices are a lot more than what they can afford. So instead of buying 100 barrels, they had to buy 50 barrels for the same amount, which is obviously affecting the cycle of the economy all around the globe.
Do you believe that this may
not just affecting the price, I'm sure they are not from their reserves. Therefore, the whole world would be affected. Not just Iran, it would be affected all the other buyers, all the other consumer of the oil. You see, the sanctions against Iran, not just because of the oil, it's sanctions against other things, like, for instance, manufacturing the weapons and the missiles and all that. And that is what the G7 intended to do to Iran, not just for the oil embargo. No, it's only for manufacturing the missiles and for the manufacturing, especially the long-range missiles, which, as we know now, it's reached far distance than what it expected. That obviously make Iran have to think twice of when they do manufacturing either weapons or missiles or any of the destructive weapons. This is make the whole world, unsafe, because if you manufacture destructive weapons like the ones manufactured in Iran, you don't know which hands will get into it and who will fire it and who will be affected.
If we could move on from this idea and rather look into like a more long-term situation, if, according to Israel, they're vowing to retaliate against Iran for the recent missile strikes, how might a prolonged military engagement or conflict affect Iran's economic stability, especially with regard to oil revenues and international trade? And how could it have an effect generally for the region when it comes to the region and its economy?
Well, you see, everything is, what you mentioned is in a cycle. The world economy is a cycle with the weapons, with the wars here and there. It's all affecting each other. It's like one body having a pain somewhere, either an arm or a hand or a leg or a feet or a head or whatever. All the body will be affected. So the economy is not just the transactions of money affecting buying or selling goods. It's affecting everything else. For instance, when we're talking about the oil embargo and oil sanction, it's affected the world economy with the grains, with the technology, with
like we've seen with Ukraine and the grain crisis we had earlier in previous times.
Yeah, it's affecting everywhere. Well, it's affecting every direction. So you cannot say just when the G7 make a sanction against Iran because of the manufacturing or the oil embargo or manufacturing weapons, it's only stopped there. No, it's affecting all the other unaffected directly countries, like the ones they import oil, because they import oil to agriculture, grains, and so on. So it's a complete cycle. It's affecting oil, affecting medicine, affecting healthcare, affecting food, affecting everything, electricity, power, energy, and everything. So it's the sanction is not stopped at one issue. It's covered a lot of others.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, sir, we're out of time for this segment, but thank you for your insights on the possibility of the sanctions' effect on Iranian the economy. Dr. Ali Khurshid, the Professor of International Economics, thank you so much for joining us. Moving to Europe, the European Commission has announced that a further 30 million euros in humanitarian aid will be sent to Lebanon as Israel's conflict with Hezbollah escalates. The boost follows the additional 10 million euros provided at the end of September, bringing this year's total amount to more than 104 million euros. The aid package aims to increase humanitarian support in Lebanon through food, shelter, healthcare, and other essential services. British services firms saw a slight slowdown in momentum but still posted growth in September, with the pace of price increases slowing to its lowest pace in nearly 4 years. The S&P Global UK Services Purchasing Managers Index dropped to 52.4 in September from 53.7 in August, which had been its highest since April. September's reading was also lower than a preliminary estimate of 52.8. The governor of the Bank of England has suggested that the bank could cut interest rates more quickly if price rises remain under control. Andrew Bailey said the bank could be a bit more aggressive in cutting borrowing costs, depending on the inflation rate. In August, the bank reduced interest rates from 5.25% to 5%, marking the first drop in more than 4 years. Bailey also mentioned that the bank was closely monitoring developments in the Middle East, especially any changes in oil prices that could drive inflation. Germany's services sector growth slowed for the 4th month in a row in September, edging close to stagnation. Declining demand and recession worries have created a bleak outlook for Europe's largest economy. The HCOB Final Services Purchasing Managers Index dropped 50.6 in September, down from 51.2 in August. This marks the lowest level in 6 months, though the index stayed just above 50 threshold that separates expansion from contraction. The survey showed the staffing cuts in the service sector also accelerated in September, although they remain moderate. Official data from the Turkish Statistical Institute shows that Turkey's annual inflation rate fell further to 49.4% in September after reaching 52%. Moving to the MENA region, the Egyptian Minister of Planning, Rania al-Mashat, has announced that Egypt's real GDP hit 2.4% in the previous fiscal year, 2023-2024. Al-Mashat also noted that the real GDP recorded 2.4% in the fourth quarter of 2023-2024. The minister stated that the recent period has witnessed numerous geopolitical impacts, which in turn affected revenues from the Suez Canal, in addition to the contractionary policies adopted by the state. The Egyptian Central Bank has announced that net foreign exchange reserves rose to $46.737 billion in September, compared to $46.597 billion in August. The increase in foreign reserves since the beginning of 2024 amounted to approximately $11.377 billion, as reserves stood at around $35.22 billion at the end of December last year. Credit agency Standard & Poor's said that the Israeli escalation has severely weakened Lebanon's economic recovery prospects. Lebanon previously called for $427 million in aid to address the refugee crisis sparked by Israeli military strikes on the country. The $427 million for shelter and relief efforts supported by the United Nations over the next 3 months, after Israeli airstrikes forced hundreds of thousands of people to leave their homes. Data from Kuwait's Central Statistical Bureau showed that Kuwait's consumer price index rose by 2.92% on an annual basis in August. The Bureau also reported that inflation also increased by 0.97% compared to July. The rise in inflation was attributed to higher prices in key categories that significantly impact the consumer price index, such as clothing, food, and education. Specifically, the price index for food and beverages jumped by 5.96% in August compared to the same month in 2023. In Gaza, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas stated that the ongoing aggressions of the Israeli occupation has resulted in the destruction of 90% of the infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. In his speech at the third summit of the Asia Cooperation Dialogue, Abbas emphasized that the region is facing serious challenges due to Israel's continued aggression and violence. He pointed out that the state of Palestine is striving to end the occupation and settlements and to halt the aggressions in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem. OpenAI, the organization behind ChatGPT, has secured $6.6 billion in new funding, valuing the company at almost $157 billion. This funding round has attracted returning ventures, capital investors, including Microsoft. Additionally, NVIDIA has joined as a new investor in this major funding effort. This influx of capital is likely to accelerate OpenAI's research and development efforts, furthering its mission to advance artificial general intelligence. OPEC Plus ministers held a meeting on Wednesday and decided to maintain their current oil output policy, including the planned increase in production starting in December. The Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee has issued a statement highlighting the critical need for full compliance and compensation. This came after reviewing crude oil production data for July and August 2024, as well as the current market conditions. The statement noted that Iraq, Kazakhstan, and Russia had confirmed they met full compliance and compensation targets for September based on the schedules they had submitted. OPEC has dismissed a recent Wall Street Journal report wholly inaccurate and misleading. The article claimed that Saudi Arabia's energy minister, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, warned oil prices could fall to $50 per barrel if OPEC Plus members did not adhere to agreed production limits. In a post on X, OPEC countered the claim about such a conference call and warning about price drops was false. The report, citing unnamed sources, alleged the minister made the statement during a conference call last week, singling out Iraq and Kazakhstan for overproduction. Oil prices rose as a prospect of widening Middle East conflict that could disrupt crude oil flows. Brent crude futures were up 2.06%, reaching $75.42 a barrel at 1211 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were up 2.25% at $71.68. Global shares tip toward losses as investors await labor market reports that will be closely analyzed by the Federal Reserve as it shifts its focus from inflation to supporting the broader economy. The United States S&P 500 slipped 0.1%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by 0.3%, while the Nasdaq Composite also rose by 0.1%. In Europe, Germany's DAX shed 0.7%, the CAC 40 in Paris gave up 0.8%, and in London, the FTSE 100 gained 0.2%. Moving to Asia, Tokyo's Nikkei 225 gained 2%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng dropped 1.4%. That's all for now. Here's a roundup of today's key headlines. U.S. State Department announces U.S. and G7 will impose sanctions on Iran.